Happy fall. Welcome to another episode of Murders, Mysteries, and More. My name is Kaylee.
And my name is Desi.
Be sure to like and subscribe, and don't forget to hit the bell next to the subscribe button to turn on post notifications. Before we get into this case, we always encourage those who have useful information to any unsolved case. Please report it to your local police and sheriff department.
Before we get into this case, please be advised that this video is not recommended for persons under the age of 18 and will contain some very graphic details. If you do not feel comfortable listening, please click off now.
I like killing people because it's so much fun. These were some of the exact words that the Zodiac Killer had said. As you can tell, because he said that, you can tell how much of a narcissist he was. With that being said, we will be bringing to life the murders done by so-called Zodiac Killer. This will be a multi-part series.
So, who exactly is the Zodiac Killer? For those who do not know, of course, he was an identified serial killer in the US that was never caught. And these killings happened in Northern California. Most of them were around San Francisco, but some did make it to Vallejo, a little bit away from the bay. The killings started in the late 60s and were estimated to end around the early 70s. The Zodiac Killer sent threats to police with ciphers, aka secret codes, and law enforcement found 5 murders and 2 attempted murders linked. However, the Zodiac Killer himself claims to have killed 30. He was very intelligent, of course, because he was never caught, and still to this day, we aren't for sure who he is.
Yeah, we definitely do not know who this man is. There are some pictures online that you can see of a general sketch of him. The first victims are David Faraday and Betty Jensen. So little background information about these two sweet little innocent high schoolers. David Faraday was around 17 years old. He was a Boy Scout. He had balls because he actually confronted a marijuana dealer and threatened to send that dealer to the police. David, like any other high school boy, fell in love with a girl, like the sweet little high school romance. That girl's name was Betty Lou Jensen. Betty Lou Jensen, she loved to paint and she was really great at drawing. She was an artist, very talented. She also was super popular. She had tons of friends. Everyone loved her.
Yeah, and these two little romantic lovebirds, of course, met at a youth function, and they worked really great together. And David actually got jealous and fought another boy over Betty. He fought for Betty, so after that, he was ready to go on a date with her, and that's what leads us into the night of the date.
You can tell he definitely loved her. Into the date night with a twisted turn. So it is December 20th, 1968. Imagine snow's about to start falling, Christmas lights everywhere, and they decide that they were going to attend a Christmas event. It doesn't really specify whether it was like a carol or a party, but some sort of event. David went to Betty's parents and he promised them that he would bring their little girl home no later than 11 p.m. David drove a station wagon. It was a Rambler. And originally that night, some sources claim that they were supposed to be attending a high school party. But for some reason, they did not go to a high school party. And they decided to take a different turn and travel to Lake Herman Road. On Lake Herman Road, there was this area called a lover's lane spot. That's where they decided to stop the car and set...
Ton action.
I mean, hey, they're teenagers. What do you say? Supposedly, they were followed by this so-called Zodiac Killer, which at the time, they didn't know that there was a Zodiac Killer. This killer ordered both of them to hop out of their vehicle and decide to shoot them. After he had shot them, he decided to leave their bodies there. Why do you think that the couple chose not to go to the high school party and stop at this Lover's Lane spot?
Maybe they chose not to go to the party because they thought it would be too boring or too hectic. Maybe there was some drugs involved. So they decided not to go and instead decided to go to Lover's Lane where they would make out and do something, of course, especially if this was like their date night or their first date. They wanted to get more intimate with each other.
Right, they probably wanted a little bit of peace and quiet. Why did the Zodiac Killer choose to follow them?
I think he chose to follow them because his target was in the Lover's Lane area. And this just happened to be the perfect couple that would fit his type as far as what he looked for, just in particular that night to murder somebody. He figured I'd follow this couple, see where they go, hope they go to Lover's Lane, and then kill them from there.
And isn't it crazy how just one little change in what the couple was gonna do ended up leading to their deaths?
Yeah, it's crazy. So, as far as the crime scene pertains, David's Rambler vehicle passenger door was open. A bullet had penetrated the roof of the vehicle and another bullet passed through a back window. There were 10 shell casings around the crime scene. David's body was found on the ground near the back passenger tire, and one bullet had actually penetrated his skull behind his left ear and went into his brain, actually, which it sounds disgusting.
Sounds painful, too.
Yeah, Betty's body was found further away from the station wagon, however, which is an indication that she may have attempted to escape the killer, but the killer shot her 5 times in the right side of her back. And, of course, Betty Lou also died. David, however, was still breathing, but he eventually died at the hospital.
That's really sad. It's crazy how, your first date leads to your death. Now, for this case, before the Zodiac Killer was really known, or this was confirmed to be the Zodiac Killer, there was a couple other suspects that the police did have in mind, because this was the first case. So, first of all, the media was freaking out when this happened because obviously, seeing 2 young high school students who were just innocent, didn't do anything wrong, now all of a sudden they're dead and the police have no idea who this killer is. And obviously, with the amount of bullets he put through Betty's back, would obviously cause chaos with the public. So some of the first suspects that the police did consider is there was a boy that we did mention in the beginning that David and him were arguing over Betty. So they theorized that maybe it was him because he wasn't able to get Betty's love, jealousy. However, that boy did have an alibi, and the police really did their investigation, and they really didn't have anything to go off of him killing them, obviously. So he ended up being Detective John Lynch does mention that David did confront a marijuana drug dealer before. So the police theorized that it could have been this drug dealer, obviously, because the drug dealer would not have once been discovered, and maybe he killed him because he told on him. But obviously there was no solid concrete evidence. Clearly neither of these suspects fit the description of who killed them.
But later on, of course, this was confirmed to be the Zodiac Killer. But the Zodiac Killer did not brag about this killing, and no taunting or threatening letters were sent to the police until months later, which then the Zodiac Killer eventually took credit. Later on, he sent in details that weren't known to the public, that were obviously only known to the killer themselves. So, therefore, the murder was officially linked to him. Why did the Zodiac Killer choose to wait to take credit for these killings?
So I think one of the main reasons why the Zodiac Killer chose to wait to take credit for these killings is this was his first killing, so he might have needed a little extra time to really gather himself and whatever plan he had to make sure he was going to do it properly. So that might have been why he hesitated to take credit. Maybe he thought if he took credit that the police would figure out really fast, but clearly he was more intelligent than them.
I agree with that. Why did the Zodiac Killer choose to taunt the police / press?
So the Zodiac Killer is a little bit different from other killers. He's definitely more for attention. He's more for narcissistic attention, like everything's about him. He chose to taunt the police/press to gain more attention to his name and also to cause chaos in the community. And he thrived off of that chaos.
I mean, yeah, he did thrive off of a lot of chaos.
Yeah.
He was very fucking chaotic, dude.
And also because he was an intelligent man, so he knew, like, oh, the police probably couldn't find it out. So he was like, well, I'm gonna taunt them to just make them feel like,
They're stupid.
Yeah, they're stupid, and then make the public not trust them anymore.
Yeah, well, to be fair, I mean, he did get away with everything, so.
Right. The Zodiac Killer did strike again. So it was the night of July 4th, 1969. 4th of July is supposed to be a day of celebration, and there's supposed to be fireworks, hanging out with friends and family. Darlene Farron, she's aged 22 years old. Michael Maggio, he was 19 years old, decided to hang out. They were best friends. And they decided to pull the car up and sit at Blue Rock Springs Park, Vallejo, California. And when they were sitting and just chilling, a brown car approached them. A gunman, the Zodiac Killer, stepped out of his car, and this was at night. They thought that the gunman was the police. However, shots were fired. Why do you think Michael thought the killer was the police?
The reason why he thought it was the police was the fact that they saw this figure approaching the passenger window with a bright light that kind of mimics like a police officer would, with his bright ass flashlight flashing in your eyes and shit when you get pulled over. Probably his stance as well led them to believe, like, hey, this is a police officer. Maybe he's just trying to check up on us or see what we're doing. They were misled because that was bang bang, they dead by Zodiac Killer.
Why do you think the Zodiac Killer chose to kind of like mock the police, like act as like a police officer in a way?
No, I don't know. Maybe he thought that he could get away with it by
Maybe getting their trust.
Maybe, but that wouldn't have worked out very well because he shot at them. So that was kind of pointless.
Yeah, he was kind of an erratic killer too.
Yeah, he was erratic as well.
All over the place.
But of course, there were bullets everywhere. Darlene was at the wheel and multiple bullets hit her. Michael was shot in the jaw. He took cover in the back and then the gunman left. Michael cried out in pain. And then the man fired several more shots into the car and walked back to his car and drove away. So around 12:40 a.m., Vallejo police dispatcher answered a call from a man who supposedly claimed, but not like they thought supposedly at the time, but it was him actually claiming that he was responsible for the shooting at Rock Springs Park. Surprised the dispatcher because he also claimed he was responsible for the murders on Lake Herman Road. Both victims, of course, were taken to the hospital. Darlene died upon arrival. But Michael, lucky Michael for him, he lived. Why did the gunman come back and fire more shots?
So, I think originally the gunman, Zodiac Killer, thought that he had actually killed Michael, so, like, both of them, so I think that's why he left out first. However, Michael did end up crying out in pain, and I imagine, like, it was very, like, loud and gruesome. So, obviously, the Zodiac Killer realized that he had not died, and so he did not want to have a witness, so he went and fired more shots trying to kill Michael, but somehow Michael still, even with as many shots were fired, he still lived by a miracle.
Why did the Zodiac Killer not come back and finish the job after finding out that Michael had survived? Because he was only one of 2 surviving victims out of all of his killings. So, you know, it kind of makes me curious why he wouldn't just come back and finish the job after finding out.
So you mean come back later?
Yeah, like later on.
So I think the reason why he might not have came back later, because if he came back later to someone he attempted to murder and was not successful, the police were already aware of stuff that would have happened, and even Michael was like kind of aware. So it would have been a much higher risk of him trying to get away with that. So he probably decided that it wasn't worth it, and instead he should go and prey on other victims. Okay, into the investigation for this murder. So obviously, like even the previous case before, this is now a double murder because there's now two people around this Lake Herman Road that have, well, two sets of couples that have been either killed or attempted to be killed by someone. Now, the police didn't know that they found out that neither of the victims knew each other, so at first they didn't really link cases at first. So for this one, they did decide to look into friends and family, ask them a bunch of questions, but they didn't find anything at all. Now, Darlene's family members mentioned that they don't know anyone who would have tried to murder her, so they're completely clueless. However, later on, her sister does come forward and say that there was this guy that did stalk her at a waitressing job. His name was George Waters, so police were like, okay, this could be a possible suspect, so they went to investigate him, but police later on said that they don't really think that George is guilty. Why did her sister wait until later to tell the police that someone at her job had been stalking her?
Maybe because she didn't think that the guy could have done it. Maybe she just thought he was a stalker and would never escalate to being a murderer. But then after thinking about it, realized, hey, this could be this dude.
And then my next question is, if George Walters, which we know he isn't guilty, but if he was guilty, then why would he have shot Michael?
He could have shot Michael to cover up his tracks, or because he was jealous of the fact that Michael was with her, and so therefore it accelerated his emotions, and he ended up shooting Michael. So here's actually a disturbing phone call log, which was a couple minutes after the murder, which we've gone over already. But Nancy Slover, a dispatcher, heard these exact words, which was, "I want to report a murder. If you go 1 mile east on Columbus Parkway, you will find kids in a brown car. They were shot with a 9mm Luger. I also killed those kids last year. Goodbye." Because of this phone call, police believe both murders on Lake Herman Road are linked. Comment what you think below.
And then also, I do want to mention about one of the cipher letters that was later on decoded. It says, "Dear editor, this is the murder of 2 teenagers last Christmas at Lake Herman, and the girl on the 4th of July near the golf course in Vallejo. To prove I killed them, I shall state some facts which only I and the police know. Christmas." So basically, later on, obviously, the police end up figuring out that these murders were linked because of the fact that the Zodiac Killer was able to give details that were not known to the public. So with that being said, that does conclude today's cases for the Zodiac Killer. As you can tell, whoever this Zodiac Killer is, he is hungry for blood. For all we know, he could still be lurking around.
But for now, thank you for listening to another episode of Murders, Mysteries, and More. Join us back next week.